What Does History Mean? By Donald Davidson. Critics' Almanac, October 20th, 1929. Much has been said on this page recently about Southern authors and Southern books. To impatient readers who may want a discussion of such contemporary writers as Ernest Hemingway and Al Smith, I can only say that the end is not yet. Their time will come, but for the moment Southern issues are red hot. Hard blows are being struck, and it is no time for folding of the hands and pure aesthetic contemplation. Passing over the obvious dominance of the South in the field of the novel, see Stark Young, Ellen Glasgow, and others, I call attention to the no less remarkable swing to the field of Southern history and social problems. Powerful books have tumbled upon us in rapid succession from the hands of Winston, Stryker, Bowers, and others, and now again from Allen Tate, whose Jefferson Davis goes far beyond his Stonewall Jackson in penetration of historical issues and in force of presentation. The very favorable reception of these books throughout the country is in itself an exciting phenomenon. It means, one supposes, that they are being read by the thousands of copies, and one hopes, duly absorbed and understood. But are they being understood? If the public read, but as the reviewers read, something is being missed. The reviews of Mr. Bowers' The Tragic Era, for example, are almost unanimous in outspoken praise, but with equal unanimity they fail to comment on the contemporary meaning of his book. The Reconstruction is discussed like some remote horror in China. The revolution after Lincoln, to these critics, concerns our present affairs as little as the revolution in the architecture of igloos.
This restraint has a diffidence in it with which I can sympathize. After all, the chorus of Northern praise represents a generous open-mindedness that Southerners should appreciate and often might emulate, and it is too much to ask, at the same time, for interpretations that might be locally embarrassing to the interpreters. Nevertheless, if the works of Winston, Stryker, Bowers, and Tate do not mean something in our society here and now, they have no meaning and are only so many adventure stories. If history so near to us as this is dead history, then no history is alive, and we had as well depend altogether on the comic strips for our social philosophy. Maybe I have a wrong answer to propose to the question of meaning, but such as it is, it shall be rendered, first, in a roundabout way. One authority, at least, has said in effect that Mr. Bowers's book has no present meaning whatever, that it is, in fact, totally irrelevant. In the October 10th issue of the New Republic, Professor Arthur M. Schlesinger of Harvard offers a review of the tragic era that is gently caustic and wholly unfavorable. He hands Mr. Bowers left-handed compliments. Mr. Bowers is the greatest living practitioner of personal history, a genius which by direct inference is not to be taken seriously. His conception of his task clearly sets him apart from the professional historian and clearly accounts for his wide public backing, i.e., Mr. Bowers's sin is being unprofessional and popular. Bowers's method is all wrong, for while it lends itself to vivid and dramatic recital, it becomes almost necessarily episodic. The great impersonal tides in human affairs are neglected, and the wholesome averages of life receive no attention. Furthermore, Bowers says nothing new. Other historians, presumably quite professional, have made known the secret this good while. And now comes an extraordinary passage. Professor Schlesinger says, "The reader would never realize that the process of Reconstruction was, as a matter of fact, exceptionally mild as such things go in history. The radicals stopped short of the crowning blunders. They confiscated practically no enemy land and put no one to death for a political offense. Furthermore, as Alan Nevins pointed out, the progress of the South did not halt, for a great part of the producing areas had been little affected. Even the much extricated black and tan state constitutions had the useful results of requiring the establishment of public school systems in the southern states. When has the signal failure of so great a rebellion been attended by such light penalties for the conquered? It was the unexampled forbearance, indeed, which made possible the spiritual reconciliation of South and North within the lifetime of the generation which had waged the war, one of the miracles of history. Could any amateur historian, one asks, make worse blunders than this eminent professional one? If Reconstruction was mild, Nero was a Christian gentleman. In what previous civil war were the conquered parties placed under the rule of their own black slaves, newly freed? It is news indeed that progress did not halt. As for the carpetbag school systems, what nonsense! In his sequel of Appomattox, Dr. Walter L. Fleming wrote, "Free schools failed in Reconstruction because of the dishonesty or incompetence of the authorities and because of the unsettled race question. It was not until the turn of the century that the white schools were again as good as they had been before 1861. After the Reconstruction, native whites as teachers of Negro schools were impossible in most places. The hostile feelings of the whites resulted, and still result, in a limitation of Negro schools." And as to Professor Schlesinger's miracle of reconciliation, one awesomely wonders whether he, naively, as Mr. Minkin, attributes the Solid South to the influence of fundamentalism. These errors refute themselves by their own absurdity. But they are, I should like to point out, perfectly consistent with the theory of history that Professor Schlesinger holds in common with many progressive historians of the Beard School. In his own book, New Viewpoints in American History, he writes, "The full force of these new energies, economic, was not immediately apparent because the attention of the public, after the emotional experience of the Civil War, was for the time being riveted upon certain perplexing questions. But with the truer perspective made possible by the passage of the years, the historians are beginning to give less attention to Southern Reconstruction and more to Northern Reconstruction, since the financial and industrial reorganization of the North has proved to be of greater enduring importance. This means that Professor Schlesinger's interests are economic and, in the curiously vague contemporary sense, social. For him, the course of history is determined not by personalities and politics, leaders and battles, but by vast impersonal movements tagged with names that flavor of science, forces, energies, and the like. History becomes the bloodless study of population pressures, food surpluses, and scarcities. Everything reduces finally to food, shelter, sex. Every great figure, every great invention, every theory of government arrives only as a kind of automatic product of overwhelming circumstance, almost like a chemical precipitate. Obviously, such a historian, busy with drawing economic graphs, would shelve Mr. Bowers's book as irrelevant and would be irritated with it as totally ignoring the beauty of his own doctrine. He would disdain the irregularities of those who make concrete man rather than abstract cause their study, and like the medical experimenter who views with calm the unhappiness of an inoculated dog, he would look unmoved on war and civil oppression, saying, "Just what one would expect. Really not so bad, eh?" Without denying the value of economic interpretations of history, I should humbly make the claim that Professor Schlesinger's methods reduce history to a thing of no practical importance. If there is no human control of society, if everything depends on vast economic forces that automatically and anonymously make everything happen, it is useless to go to history for lessons as to conduct. For the forces act, whether we will or no, and we had just as well save our strength and sit around and wait for the forces to do their stuff. Significantly, Professor Schlesinger comes originally from the Middle West, which is unconscious of any historical past, and which, with the industrialized East, has committed America to the worship of certain abstractions, notably money and success. Professor Schlesinger believes that these personal historical studies have no meaning. To me, and I believe to anyone brought up in the South, they are full of meaning for the specific thing that Professor Schlesinger so dislikes. They brush aside abstract forces and center our attention on human beings of our own near past who, for good or ill, foolishly or wisely, took responsibility into their hands, and by their personal, particular force determined the scheme under which we live today. And if they did thus, have we not an equal liberty of procedure, which ought to be wiser by the benefits of their bad or good example? No one can read Mr. Tate's book or Mr. Bowers's without the profound conviction that history would have been otherwise if men had acted otherwise. These works surely restore to us the feeling of responsibility that science and historians of the scientific school seem to want to take away. We should be ashamed before God and man not to take such books to heart.